this is government for SS2. Let us start with the prospects. Prospects for anyone who studies any government-related course in the university. The person can be a political analyst, a teacher, or even a lecturer in the university or any tertiary institution, or an officer of government agencies. Now we'll go ahead to start with the first topic, electoral process. Under electoral process, we shall be talking about elections. What do we mean by elections? It is the process through which citizens of a state choose their representative in a democratic system. It is through the means of election that the masses are given the opportunity to choose those who will represent them as government officials. The next is, what is the purpose of elections? Why do we conduct elections? Because the answer to this question can be seen from the definition we gave earlier to elections. First, to choose representatives. Second, to change a government. Elections are conducted because the life of a government has ended and it's time for the life of another government to start, so election is conducted. And finally, it bestows legitimacy. Through election, when people are allowed to elect, the government in power is given legitimacy. So these are the three main purposes of elections. Let us now talk about suffrage. What is suffrage? Suffrage is the right to vote. Of course, when there's an election, we have to talk about the right of people to vote. So that right to vote is what we refer to as suffrage. We have a number of suffrages, if you like, types. We want to discuss them one at a time. First is the adult suffrage. This is an electoral system in which all adult men and women who are qualified are allowed to vote. The next is the male suffrage. And as the name implies, it has to do with the situation where only men are allowed to vote. When just men are allowed to vote, such type of suffrage is referred to as the male suffrage. The next is property suffrage. What do you mean by property suffrage? Property suffrage is a situation or a type of suffrage where owners of property or assets are allowed to vote. This is the type of suffrage we refer to as property suffrage. The next is taxpayers suffrage. What do we mean by taxpayers suffrage? Only those who show evidence of tax payment are allowed to vote in this type of suffrage. The next is franchise. What is franchise? Remember, we said that suffrage is the right to vote. But in the case of franchise, it is not just the right to vote, it is the right to vote and the right to be voted for. And that's the difference between suffrage and franchise. Types of franchise. We have the limited franchise and the unlimited franchise. In the limited franchise, there is a limit or there are barriers inhibiting a number of persons from voting. Those who vote are supposed to meet certain criteria. In certain parts of the Arab countries before now, women were not allowed to vote. In South Africa, during the apartheid regime, the blacks were not allowed to vote. Such system of franchise is the one we refer to as the limited franchise, where people's right to vote go beyond the fact that they are qualified. Even when someone is an adult and is qualified to vote, he is limited by virtue of either his sex or his color or even the race. Such is the type of franchise we refer to as a limited franchise. The unlimited franchise, which is the second type of franchise, is a situation where every adult qualified citizen is allowed to vote, irrespective of gender, irrespective of social class, irrespective of color and what have you. That is what we refer to as unlimited franchise. The next is characteristics of electoral system. What are the features of electoral system we want to know? First, in any electoral system, there must be an independent electoral commission. In Nigeria, we refer to such commission as the Independent National Electoral Commission, that's INEC. The next is periodic and regular election. There must be periodic and regular election for any electoral system. The next is adequate political education, which of course is part of the job of political parties. These are three characteristics of electoral system. The next we want to consider is type of electoral system. And the first is the simple majority. In the simple majority type of electoral system, the candidate with the highest vote or number of votes is declared winner. If the total number of votes or voters are 100, total number of votes 100, and we have two candidates vying for a political position, the candidate that makes up to 60 as against 40 is declared winner because he's got the highest number of votes. The next is the absolute majority, which is a type of electoral system. In this method, a candidate must secure more than 50% of the entire vote cast. More than 50%. I'm sure you're beginning to wonder how this differs from the other type of electoral system. That's a simple majority. Now, I'll explain a little. If, for instance, we have three candidates and we have 100 votes cast, the first candidate gets 40, the other candidate gets 30 votes. That is 100. The other candidate who gets 40 cannot be declared winner. Why? In an absolute majority. Why? Because he did not secure more than 50% of the vote. He only got about 40%, while others shared 30%. But in a simple majority, a candidate of that nature who's got about 40 as against 30 is declared winner. But in an absolute majority, he is not declared winner because even though he got the highest number of votes, he did not make up to 50% of the entire vote cast. I'm sure that is very clear to you now. We move over to the next type of electoral system, which is the proportional representation. This is the type of election where representation in the legislature is shared in such a way that it reflects the percentage of vote cast in favor of a group party. So the party that gets the highest vote gets the highest representation in the parliament, in the proportional representation. Now, merit of the proportional representation. One, it gives true reflection of popular votes. And second, it is democratic. Yes, through the proportional representation, we get to know candidates that are very popular. And of course, that is one of the identifying marks of a democratic system. We shall not talk about the demerits of proportional representation. First, it is very expensive to operate. Yes. Second, it encourages multiplicity of political parties. And of course, when you have multiplicity of political parties, it could trigger election violence. We shall not talk about direct electoral system. Of course, we shall be discussing that against the background of indirect electoral system. But let's start with the direct electoral system. In this system, qualified citizens are allowed to cast their vote directly to elect their representatives. And this is against the indirect system, where citizens elect a representative or a number of people who represent them. Through them, their representatives now will be elected in what we call the Electoral College. The second, ballot system. And this is a system that is adopted when no candidate obtains a majority of the vote cast in the absolute majority. So when no candidate wins the election or acquires the number of votes required in absolute majority, the formula that is applied in a situation like that is referred to as the second ballot system. The next topic is organization of elections. How are elections organized? Now we should start with free and fair election and its futures. The future of a free and fair election is this. 1. No imposition of candidates. 2. Qualified adults are not restricted from voting. If you are qualified and you are an adult, if you've gotten up to the age of 18,